What's up, everybody? Your Bike Fit team from Team Wilpers here to share with you some of our nerdery with regards to getting prepped for taking the bike outside. Not literally, of course, but riding outside. So, Anthony here. We have Lori and Brian with us. And Lori, take it away. You had a story you wanted to share.
I do. I have a good story. Um, I live in Northern California and I run a women's cycling program. And we have a series of progressive rides that lead into an event. So these 12-week series. And a couple of years ago, we were on the first ride and I was riding with this woman. And she showed up on a brand new gravel bike and she said, "It's my first time riding outside." But she was really strong. And she told me, "Well, I do power zone training through Peloton." And I was in class and Matt Wilper said to me, like he said it just to her, "You should get a bike and ride outside." So she did. But it was an interesting process because she was intimidated by going to the bike shop. And so she ordered a direct to consumer bike. She was climbing the hills like crazy, beating everybody up the hills, but she couldn't ride downhill. She was terrified. She stood at the, and these weren't even like big hills. These were like little rollers, 3 to 5%, and stood at the top of the hill being afraid of riding down the hill. And fast forward, she progressed. We had a number of skills clinics throughout the series, and she has become a pretty good descender and is still a super fit rider. Her 20-year-old daughter is now riding with her too, and she's also gotten herself a road bike as well, and now is a ride leader too. So she made that transition, learned a lot of things along the way. Sometimes that learning process is not as smooth or as easy as we think it can be. And we want to drop some knowledge with you today that should help in that process.
Yeah, I
So,
think I'll jump right in on that because I think that's a story we hear often. Maybe not, hearing like you should ride outside from, a class and then
From
pop right
Matt.
outside. But, as bike fitters, and Anthony, you worked in a bike shop for a really long time. What's that story that we hear or we see these people come in that just got a bike, right? They didn't go to a bike shop or they didn't really have a full understanding of what to do because bike shops are intimidating. And we were talking about this a little bit. Like, I get intimidated. Like I just had to rechange like my drivetrain on my gravel bike. And I did my research and understood what I want, but still going to the bike shop and having to ask the mechanic or the salesperson, like, hey, does this crank arm fit on my bike? And like I've been in this business for over 20 years and I'm nervous asking these questions. So I can only imagine what it's like for somebody who is a complete novice to this, has only been riding indoors going in. So I think that's what needs to change in this industry as a whole is like for people to feel comfortable coming in. Like we're not all mean. Like bike shops aren't mean. I don't know why I think these people are going to judge me. You're right, but I do. I think they're going to judge me. So, I think these conversations is all about trying to get information out there to arm people. And I think that's also why we started the cycling basics, that 30-minute conversation that you can have with just one of us, right? Like it's to handle that same type of situation. Like, your friend bought a gravel bike. Well, is a gravel bike the right bike she should have bought first, or she
Right.
should have been on a road bike first? Right. That's a conversation you have to have, maybe not with a salesperson who's trying to get something off their floor. Right. So I think like that, say, cycling basics as far as being able to get on the phone with somebody who doesn't have a horse in the race trying to sell you something can give you that honest opinion and try to help you narrow down to like what it is you want. It can be nerve wracking.
So, what
totally.
type of bikes are we talking about? If somebody's been riding indoors on a Peloton and they want to make that transition, how do they decide what type of bike is appropriate for them?
That's a really good question. I'll take this one. So, uh, when I was selling bikes every day, it's all about the questions, right? So the first question I would usually lead off with is, what kind of riding do you foresee yourself doing? And let's dive in with this, right? Like we don't necessarily want to talk about the rider who you are now. Like what kind of rider do you think you might even become? So, and people usually answer that question pretty well. I'm not going mountain biking. I'm not really going to be on the dirt. I'm thinking pavement, maybe it's more casual. It's, I just want to ride with my family. I want to go to the park, stuff like that. It's okay. Well, let's maybe start talking about a hybrid bike or something like that. Something with a flat handlebar, relatively relaxed riding position, stuff like that. But then you start hearing answers to that question of just like, oh, my buddy does centuries, and for those who don't know, that's 100 miles in one shot. But my buddy does centuries and he's just like egging me on, like I got to do these rides with him and stuff like that. And I'm like, all right, we should probably start talking about a road bike. We need something that's light and efficient, and and then kind of asking all those questions and figuring out what is best for you. So at the end of the day, it's you kind of have to ask yourself that, what bike do I need to accomplish the goals that I have? So a gravel bike is a great option because it's arguably one of the most versatile options you have at your disposal. It's essentially a road bike with a drop handlebar that can accommodate big wide tires, kind of almost like a mountain bike sometimes. So you can almost, getting a gravel bike is a really nice option for a lot of people because you can, based on the tire that you have installed, you can kind of do whatever you want. So yeah, that's kind of the process by which people can kind of go through the process of elimination. And then to Brian's point, if they want to ask that question outside of a sales environment, then one could book the time with us, and we could not even be talking about specific brands or anything like that, but just like, this is the type of bike I would like to recommend, and this is probably the size you need based on your height and some other factors involved. So yeah.
I would add one point to that, which is don't buy a starter bike. A lot of people do that. I see a lot of women do that more than men. Men will buy the $10,000 bike. Women will try to buy the $500 hybrid when maybe they do want to ride with a club or they want to ride with their buddies and do long distance riding. A hybrid is great for more casual riding, like you said, with your family. May not be appropriate if I'm going to go out and do club rides with other people on road bikes. So I think allow yourself to buy a bike that you might be able to grow into as well, and don't start with a starter bike because it's going to be a bigger investment down the line. People are like, oh, I don't want to spend that much money now, but guess what, you're going to love the sport, and then you're going to come back and then you'll buy the road bike and you have to get rid of the hybrid. So
Yeah,
Totally.
and if you are doing a club ride of some sort, that if that's on your future thing, there might be requirements of the type of bike you have to have. Drop bar, not flat bar, things of that nature. So I agree. I
no
think that
aero bars.
no aero bars or triathlon bike. So I think it's a conversation. I think that's probably the most important conversation. I know I have it a lot of times in my fit studio, is like somebody wants a triathlon bike because they're going to do triathlons, and then we end up having a conversation realizing a road bike is going to suit them much better in the long run. And a gravel bike is a pretty good safe bet for most people. It's very versatile, but the downside to that is it's going to be a bit slower, even with some road, quote unquote, road tires on there. It's going to be a little bit slower. So if you're already fearful that you're going to be falling behind and holding people up, all right, well, maybe are you ever going to go on the dirt? Because if you're not, let's just go with the road bike and save a little bit of speed.
Yeah.
So I do think those conversations are really important to have beforehand, right? There's a reason I own so many bikes. It's because each bike really does serve a purpose, as much as my wife does not believe that. Each one does serve a purpose, right? And I picked the proper tool for the thing. Now, I'm also very specific, right? And I'm looking at this from a competitive perspective. That's why I need all these different tools. If I was just looking at it as a fitness perspective, then yes, I could narrow it down to 4
1 or
instead
2.
of 7.
People always ask that question too. They're like, how many bikes do you have? I'm like, that's a very personal question, but it's interesting. I will say, if I had one bike, it would be my gravel bike because I can ride it on pretty much anything. And yes, there's a little penalty in the speed, but not that much. I just get stronger. And gearing is also a consideration on the gravel bike because I typically have much easier gearing to be able to climb a lot of mountain bike trails around here, which at the high end, it means I do lose a little bit, and I do like to go fast, especially downhill. So
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I find that a lot of people, because the one of the one of the objections you get, you know, is from as somebody who used to be the sales guy. Like the person walks through the door and immediately goes like, oh, I'm not a racer, I don't want to race, you know. And it's like, okay, I get it, you don't want to literally race, you don't want to pin a number on and be in the pack, but are you competitive against yourself? You know, and most people are. So it's like, all right, well, maybe we want to consider something a little bit more performance oriented so you can, you know, get those PRs and go a little faster and that kind
Mhm.
of stuff. So that's the conversation that, you know, needs to be had for sure. But I'm going to use that as a segue. That sounds like a good a good time to talk about, you know, what are some of the barriers for people? What are some of the things that are maybe holding people back from exploring riding outdoors versus just staying in their little pain cave on their Peloton, which is not a bad thing. But you know, outside is fun too. So what are some of the objections or you know barriers that kind of get in the way?
I'll jump in on this one first because I think this is a barrier for people going from inside to outside, very beginning. And I think this is a current barrier for a lot of people who ride outside that are migrating more inside is safety.
Mhm.
I just think the fear factor, you know, and I think it's twofold. I think, you know, getting in an accident with a car is not a good thing. And I think we all go out for a ride with that, hopefully not in the back of our head, but you know, it's always lingering there. And there are a lot of safety tools out there as far as blinking lights now, daytime running lights and things of that nature, and radars. Like I can literally on my computer see a car approaching me from behind that warns me, I think it's like 200 feet back or something like that. So there are good safety things there, but I think that is a fear that a lot of people have. I know it stops my wife from riding outside more than she would want to. Um, and I also think that then comes down into bike decisions. You know, a gravel bike means I can ride on dirt roads. Dirt roads means that they're less traveled. I see a lot less cars Monday through Friday on dirt roads than I do out on the main road. So I think safety is probably the number one concern. What I can say is I ride roughly 10,000 miles a year, you know, 8 to 10,000 miles a year, and I remain pretty safe.
You need to get a job. You can
I have a
ride that
very
many
flexible,
miles.
I have a very flexible job.
Safety is a big concern, and there are things we can do to mitigate that. And I've spent the last 20 plus years teaching people how to be safer, right? So, what can I do? The clothing I wear, black is slimming, it's not visible. I'm going to wear bright clothing when I'm on the road. As you mentioned, lights, front lights, rear lights, my radar. And I resisted a radar for a long time. And I'm like, this is a great tool. Why did I not do this? I even have bright colored bikes. Learning how to handle my bike, as a lot of the folks who are in our current Team Wilper cycling challenges are learning, there's a big difference between riding inside and outside. Just the simple fact of I choose to use a clipless pedal system, but I don't know how to clip in and out when I'm outside and moving. Learning to hold your line, which is a term we use for being consistent and predictable when I ride instead of swerving all over the place. Learning how to look over my shoulder. So how can I, you know, erase those barriers? Well, I can learn to ride my bike. I can take a skills clinic. Believe it or not, there are people who teach you how to ride your bike, even as an adult. At all different levels. There are road clinics and mountain bike clinics. There are commuting clinics. So I would say check with the cycling clubs in your area or the bike shops in your area or your bicycle coalitions, which are the safety and advocacy organizations, and learn some skills. Anything else we learn as an adult, we learn some skills, and then it can be relatively safe. Statistically, it is relatively safe to ride a bike. We don't have to crash, but unfortunately, we live in this culture that believes we do. There are those who have and those who will, and I don't believe that. I believe you don't have to crash your bike.
Yeah, totally. And I think, you know, something that's really important too. So, you know, I'm going to say something a little controversial here. Are you ready for this? Cyclists, let's be honest, are part of the problem. That there's a lot of tension between cyclists and motorists. And we've all seen this, you know, because most cyclists are also motorists. You see it all the time. Cyclists running red lights. You see people riding down the double yellow line sometimes, like, and that's just doing generally irresponsible things. And from my experience leading group rides, which I did for a number of years, it's always the irresponsible cyclist that has the most altercations. They're the ones who are getting in shouting matches with motorists on the side of the road,
Pounding on the car.
right.
It's
Like
don't do that.
and what makes that terrible, not just for that particular rider, but for riders in general, is every time you throw your leg over a bike and go outside, you represent the entire cycling community. So as far as safety is concerned, just being a conscious, a responsible rider, like stopping at that stoplight, staying as far to the right as is safe, those kinds of things. They're simple things, but they work wonders, in terms of the relationship between car and rider.
Or maybe we should say driver and rider.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, technically.
Because, like, I mean,
also,
sorry, but like one of the things that I see all the time is riders who will split the lane in between cars at a stoplight and then like station themselves in front of all the cars, right? So when that light turns green, like they're blocking all the traffic at that point. Right? So it's just like stay behind the cars. They can out accelerate you much easier than you can out accelerate them, so let them get out of your way. And that's just one little example. But I think we as the riders need to make sure we're being the best that we can be on the road, so that way tensions are at a minimum, and that can really help with the safety aspect of it as well.
And it's also the law. I try to encourage people to, when you ride your bike, drive your bike, think about the vehicle code and follow the law. That's one of the reasons why we do have collisions, is we don't follow the law. I think the other point I was going to make was the fact that we've seen such a boom in ridership in the last few years due to the pandemic. And a lot of folks traditionally have learned how to ride as part of a club environment or a bike shop environment. And I think a lot of the folks who are new to the cycling community, a lot of them don't even realize that exists. And you'll see people that go to the mountain bike trails and they don't know there is etiquette on the trails as well, set by IMBA, which is the International Mountain Biking Association. And if you go to the trailhead when you're on the mountain bike trail, there's a list of rules for that trailhead, but people don't even think to stop and look at that. And who has the right of way, whether it's me or, in the case of riding off-road, oftentimes we have conflicts with other trail users like pedestrians and equestrians, and we have to be mindful of that. Who has the right of way, the individual rider or the group, the individual rider or the horse? So learning what the rules and the etiquette are and the language of cycling, which I would encourage you, again, find that mentorship in your club setting.
Yeah, or ask us.
Or ask us.
Right?
Exactly.
We've been through this for a very long time, right? Like I've been mountain biking since the early 90s and have seen those rules change, over the last 30 years of what is appropriate and not appropriate. And, as Anthony was saying, like following all traffic laws is super important when you're on the bike, unless you're in New York City. If you're in New York City, there's no rules. Just go between the cars, bang on them, do whatever you have to do. No, but there is
on their windshield.
A little cheeky there, but there is a little bit of truth to that for like New York City and urban riders is, yes, when I'm riding around, I try to stay as far right as I can on the road. But when I'm in an unsafe position, I do not ride as far right as I can. I ride as far left in the middle to not invite somebody to try to pass me in an unsafe spot. So these are all like the little things that you learn over the years of riding instinctively, or if someone has taught you, that I think are important conversations to have, or to find that resource of a local club and take these kind of clinics. This is the type of stuff that's, like I said, you can't become an experienced rider in 2 weeks, but I can gain the experience of an experienced rider in 2 weeks, right? Yeah. I can learn the lessons Lori has learned. I can learn the lessons Anthony has learned, right? I won't physically do them, but I can learn from them. And that's teaching. That's the whole point. You go to a mentorship program. So I think that's key. finding that local clinic and learning how to ride outside.
Yeah, totally. And to your point,
And
exactly, everything's contextual. It's like there's the right thing and the wrong thing, but sometimes in a certain situation, you kind of have to do the wrong thing to be the right thing.
right.
So yeah, I hear you.
And I would also say it's okay to be a beginner.
Yeah,
A lot of times we get in our own way because first of all, we assume we know how to ride bikes because most of us did that as a child, but we don't really know how to ride bikes. And it's okay not to know. It's okay to admit that you need help or that you don't understand or that you're afraid. That's how we learn, when we open up ourselves to being in that beginner mindset and then learning. No one's judging you if you're a beginner. It's cool to be a beginner. You just improve all the
Especially
time.
group rides. People
Yeah.
love beginners on group rides. Like everybody loves it because everybody wants to be a teacher,
yep.
right? Like the moment you're like, oh, this is my first kind of group ride. Like if there's 10 people on that group ride, 10 people are going to try to teach you something. So it's really inviting, I gotta say, in those situations.
Cool beans. So yeah, guys, I guess to wind this down, hopefully to our viewers out there who are seeing this, hopefully you may have been inspired to take that step, you know. But if not, if you'd like to find out more or ask more questions, get more in depth as to what pertains to you specifically, we're here. We have this new service. Cycling Basics is what we're calling it, and you simply just book time with one of us, and we're here to answer your questions, whatever they may be. So thanks for tuning in, guys.
And like Matt Wilper said, get a bike and ride outside.
Take care, y'all. Bye-bye now.
Bye bye.